presidential election of 2000 by raising your hand. Who was it, William? George Bush. Do you know how many votes he got?
50 million.
Okay.
460,000.
Okay.
918.
Okay. So, is that the vote that counted? That popular vote?
Yes.
Yes?
No,
Oh.
the electors votes.
Electors vote. Who agrees? Give me a thumbs up if you agree. Electors votes. We've got some that agree. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So George Bush had 50,460,110 votes, right? Al Gore had 51,000. That's kind of funny because he had more popular votes, but he didn't win, isn't it? Or isn't it? Let's learn a little bit about that. So we're going today talk about something called, up here, so I'm speaking, everybody should be tracking me. Lawrence, Arthur, sorry. Look, guys, I'm sorry. All right, so we're going to talk about the Electoral College today and the electoral votes. Not electors' votes, but the electoral votes, okay? This is something that's really important that you should know about because the election's coming up. Raise your hand if you know when the election is coming up. When is it, Diabian? November 6th, which is Tuesday, right? Who's running in our election, in this election? By raising your hand. Michael, who's one person that's running? Mitt Romney, and the other one is obviously President Obama, right? Okay, good. So I just handed out some information for you on the Electoral College. We're going to read over this together and figure out a little bit more about it. So write your name on it. This is information that you'll have a quiz on tomorrow. And again, it's important to know. It's important to know because the election's coming up. All right. So follow along with me as I go. One of the most important events in American government and politics is the starting over. So one of the most important events in American government and politics is the election of the President of the United States. And on Tuesday, November 6th, just like Diabian said, that's when it's taking place. And Americans were, ladies, I'm speaking. Raise your hand if you have a question. So the American people will cast their ballots. What's a ballot? Joseph, what's a ballot? A vote, right. All right, so this event is held every 4 years and is often compared to as a race, so a presidential race, right? This can be a race for president, this can be student council president, this can be any sort of election that's going on. So we say someone is running for office and that the presidential race is on. And so that's going to be happening. Now we talked a little bit about President Bush versus Al Gore in the election of 2000. And we know that President Bush was the winner. And we talked a little bit, we mentioned so far the electoral votes. We're going to watch a short clip that explains a little bit about that, okay? Okay, here we go.
And how does it compare with the other ones that you studied so closely?
There's no question that in a time of peace and prosperity like this, it's possible for a country to have such a division as it do. Uh-oh, something happened.
George Bush is the president-elect of the United States. He has won the state of Florida according to our projections. 25 electoral votes. NBC News projects that George Bush, it's been a night of first giving it to Al Gore, then taking it away on the part of the networks. George Walker Bush, the new president of the United States, the governor of Texas, the first father-son governor combination since the Adams family. This is the scene in Austin, Texas tonight. It's been a long, suspenseful evening. Karl Rove and the governor had a master their strategy. They stuck to it. They were confident, and they proved right. At 2:18 in the morning Eastern Time, 1:18 at the state capitol in Texas, they pulled it off. A long, difficult run. They took on the right wing of the Republican Party. They went into enemy territory, Tennessee, Arkansas, states like West Virginia, which they won. They took on as well states like Missouri, which have been in the Democratic cycle in the past, and they won those states too. They cobbled together a coalition in the Southeast, the Great Plains, far west, but Florida, in the final analysis, the home state of Governor Jeb Bush, it's going to be a much happier Thanksgiving for the Bush family. George Walker Bush, the 43rd President of the United States, a young man who, by his own acknowledgement, drifted for 20 years after he got out of college, then got involved in the oil business and in baseball, quit drinking at the age of 40, married a wonderful, supportive woman, and she's been a big asset. Laura Bush, 2 daughters, both freshmen in college this year, one at Yale, one at UT, and now the Bush name goes back to the White House.
Okay, so I know many of you probably don't remember the election of 2000, but did you pick up on the state that they said won the election for President Bush? Did you hear which state they said won the election? Which one? Green? Florida, right. So let me just fill you in a little bit about what happened. So President Bush was actually losing in the electoral votes, okay? I'm going to explain to you more about what that is in just a minute. But the electoral votes he was losing. And it came down to Florida, which has 25 electoral votes, and he ended up winning 271 to 246. You have to have, and this is something you want to write down, you have to have 270 electoral votes in order to become President of the United States. You can write on this handout I gave you. So 270 electoral votes to win the election of President of the United States. That's a magic number. That's the number you're going to see on Tuesday night. 270. So let's, 270. So let's go where it says, so how was our president elected? Well, that was a good question. I'm really glad you asked. So follow along with me. There's actually a system called the Electoral College that determines who will win the election. Often ignored, Americans had a lesson on the workings of the Electoral College after the 2000 election, the one we just saw the clip of. Al Gore won the popular vote, but George W. Bush became president. George Bush won because he had 5 more electoral votes than Al Gore. Because of how the system is set up, it is possible for one candidate to win the popular vote and the other to win the electoral vote. We're going to look more into what the electoral vote actually is in another clip. So, Al Gore had the popular vote. The people voted for him, and he won based on the popular vote. However, he did not have the electoral votes, so he didn't win the election. We're going to look at a real-life example real quickly of how the Electoral College works, and then we're going to talk about it. One second. This is a good one. You guys will like this. Here we go.
Where I can find the Electoral College.
No, Tennessee.
Raise it up.
George W. Bush is the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes.
That's not fair at all.
Get over it, it's so old by now.
Electoral College is simply an antique. It's obsolete.
So maybe if you know something, you see it a little bit. It stands out.
I'm Mo Rocca. Today, Electoral College 101.
The Electoral College was created after a summer that the founding fathers spent scratching their heads and trying to figure out how to choose a president. One thought was to have Congress choose the president. And they thought, no, that would make the president too dependent on Congress. There were a few people who said, let's have a national election. But that was opposed, partly because it was felt that people wouldn't know the candidates, you know, the rural countries spread out. The other reason against the popular election was that it would have given less power to the slaveholding South. So they came up with this idea of having an indirect election where you choose electors, and then the electors choose the president.
Sounds good in theory, but in practice, well, even a third grader can see there are problems. We're going to have a little election here, and I'm going to ask you to choose between the two candidates, colored pencils and markers. Who is voting for colored pencils? Okay. 10 votes for colored pencils. Who is voting for markers? 14 for markers. Markers have won the popular vote. And now we're going to have the real election. Naturally, they were disappointed. They thought we just had the election. But now it was time to warp these young minds by introducing them to the Electoral College. So we broke the class into 5 tables or states. The majority at each table, either markers or colored pencils, would get the table's 1 electoral vote. Of course, in real life, states have varying amounts of electoral votes, depending on the population. Table 1's elector, how do you cast your vote?
Markers.
Table 2's elector, how do you cast your vote?
Markers.
Table 3's elector.
Colored pencils.
In the end, the whole election came down to 1 state. Table 5's elector. Angel, come on down. This is it, guys. This will decide the whole thing. Elector, how do you cast your vote?
Colored pencils.
What's that?
Everybody should be fair. It's unfair. Because it's not just about the elector's vote, it's about everybody's vote.
Oh, Aubrey, you are a rabble-rouser. I mean, clearly you're trying to whip them up into a frenzy.
It has to be fair for everybody who voted for markers, not just for colored pencils. It's 14 to 10. It should stay that way.
Yeah, this guy's a dangerous reformer. You know, it's not like this happened in real life. Oh, actually it did.
They set up this electoral college business, and since then, nearly 1 in 10 presidents took the White House without winning the popular vote. Like me, John Quincy Adams.
I'm George W. Bush, and I like to think of myself as the education president, starting with my favorite college, the Electoral College. That's in Florida, right?
The key thing that frustrates people about the Electoral College today is that it sidelines and marginalizes 2/3 to 3/4 of the whole country. Most of us live in red states or blue states. Take our 4 biggest states. 3 of them are safe states. Texas, a red state. California, a blue state. New York, a blue state. Only Florida is sometimes a swing state. That means in 3 of our 4 biggest states, there's no campaigning. The voter turnout rate is like 5 to 10 points lower than it is in the swing states where all the TV ads are. Why should the vast majority of the public have no real role in electing the president? It doesn't make any sense.
There have been more bills in Congress to change the Electoral College than on any other issue. And it's not a partisan cause. Republican President Richard Nixon supported a constitutional amendment to abolish it.
Whoever wins the popular vote should be the next president of the United States.
Well, you don't have to go back to the 60s to find a conservative who was opposed to the Electoral College.
I was in Congress when this fellow pushed something called the Medicare Prescription Drug Plan. And it was the worst piece of legislation I have ever had to sit through. And it was the most heavily lobbied I have ever seen.
And what did it have to do with the Electoral College?
Yes, I'll tell you, it was all about the Electoral College. All about getting him the electoral votes of the state of Florida.
Most Americans love the idea of having a popular vote for president, and the national popular vote legislation is the single most promising avenue we've got to break from the bizarreness of the Electoral College.
Currently, every state except 2 awards all its electoral votes to the winner of its popular vote, creating red and blue states. But with the new legislation, states that sign on will award their electors to the winner of the national popular vote, thereby rendering the Electoral College moot. This legislation will go into effect when the number of electoral votes from participating states totals 270, the magic number needed to win the presidency.
We actually